Time to pull up a chair and talk some Dynasty football. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and this is the Ride or Dynasty podcast. Tonight, we continue our Divisional Fantasy Focus series with the AFC North. Joining me is my brother and my fellow middle school teacher, Big Daddy Don Detweiler. How are you doing, Don?
I'm doing great, buddy. It's always good to come and talk a little AFC North here. Here we go.
Yeah, I know. This is your division. Returning from the writer's room is Brendan Taff. How are you doing, Brendan?
I'm doing well. I'm glad to be back. This isn't my division. I'm a Bills fan, but probably one of the more interesting divisions in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. And another fan who is joining us for the first time is Tyler Dell. How you doing, Tyler?
Good. What's going on, guys? I'm a big Steelers fan. Glad to bring that count from 1 to 2. But yeah, this is a great division. I've grown up watching it, always competitive games. In my youth, it was dominated by Pittsburgh, but not so much anymore. So
awesome. Well, we're so happy to have you here. Why don't you tell the riders a little bit about your fantasy background?
So I have a Dynasty wide receiver manifesto, part 1 and 2 up, articles I've written. Those are the first 2 I wrote. I pretty much specialize in wide receivers, I guess. That's like my favorite area to talk about for Dynasty football. Also, notoriously and infamously, Antonio Gibson truther. That is the hill I will die on, no doubt about it. But yeah, wide receivers. I love to talk wide receivers. Anybody on Twitter want to hit me up about wide receiver questions? Anytime, any place.
Yeah, Tyler's wide receiver manifesto was fantastic. Both parts are available. So check out our website at riderdynasty.com. We are publishing articles every day from our amazing writers. You can follow us on Twitter at Ride or Dynasty. And of course, like and subscribe to the pod. And if you leave a review, we will read it on air. Now, without any further ado, let's dive right into the AFC North with our division winners and losers. All right, Don, who do you think is going to win the division this year?
To me, it's absolutely a 2-team race here. We got the Steelers and we got the Ravens, and I'm going Steelers. I know for me it's a homer pick. I'm a big Steelers fan, admittedly, but I see them as being more experienced, and now with the league having had an offseason to pick apart what the Ravens do, I think they're going to be a little bit easier to stop, and teams are going to be more prepared. So with a healthy Ben coming back and throwing for the Steelers, I give it to the Steelers and that dynamic defense.
All right, and who's coming in last in the division, Don?
Oh, it's unfortunate. Yet again, the Bungles bungle it all up. There might be light on the horizon, but it ain't here yet.
All right, Tyler, who do you have winning the division?
This is going to sound super redundant, but I'm also going with my Steelers. But to touch on, it is a 2-team race, in my opinion. That's the 2 teams I was picking between Pittsburgh and Baltimore. The reason I picked Pittsburgh, 8-8 last year, with absolutely probably the most painful offensive football I've ever had to watch as a fan in my memory. I think if you add future Hall of Fame Super Bowl winning quarterback to that 8-8 team and actually give them a passing offense that averages, somewhere north of 200 yards, I just think that you're looking at 11-5, 12-4 football team, which, to be fair, is probably right where Baltimore finished. So it's kind of a coin flip, but I'm a homer. So yeah.
Nothing wrong with being a homer.
Right.
Who's coming in last?
Also, nothing really historically out of the ordinary here. Cincinnati Bengals, and it's really, I think the organization is going in the right direction. I like the coach. I like Burrow. I just think the whole team itself is a year or 2 away. I think they do them some good to maybe get some bottom 5, bottom 10 finishes. Maybe add like a top tackle in the draft next year. Maybe another receiving weapon once they ultimately part ways with AJ Green. But it's just a competitive division. I like what Baker's got going on in Cleveland. And obviously, I've already said that Pittsburgh and Baltimore are 2 good teams. So, sorry, Bengals.
All right, Brendan, who's winning the division?
Sorry, guys, but it's the Ravens again. I don't really think you can figure out Lamar Jackson. He played a bunch of games his rookie year and obviously was the MVP last year. So that's plenty of games to try to figure him out, and there's just no stopping him. He's that dynamic. He's that good. They're a complete team on both sides. But I agree with you. I do think it'll be a two-team race. The Ravens and, the Browns. I think they'll be better than the Steelers this year. But, my last place team is same as you guys. It's the Bengals.
Wow. All right. Well, I have to admit, I'm not a fan of the Steelers. After the Patriots, they're my least favorite team, but only because of Ben Roethlisberger. So once he's gone, they'll move up. So I'm going with the Ravens to win this division. They've added talent across the board. I like their defense better than the Steelers. So I think the Ravens are going to top the Steelers for the division win. I don't have the Browns in that close to it. I actually have the Browns finishing last in the division. I think the Bengals are going to surprise some people, and the Browns are going to discover that Baker Mayfield is not a good QB. And he is the anchor that is going to drag that offense down. All right, so we seem to be kind of in agreement. Everybody hates Cincinnati, and we're all kind of torn between Pittsburgh and the Ravens, which makes sense historically in that division. So let's dive right in to our first team, the Baltimore Ravens, coming off a fantastic season last year. Lamar Jackson, Tyler, what are we thinking about Lamar Jackson?
So for fantasy purposes, I think you're just going to see some regression in terms of his rushing yards and how his touchdown rate, basically just overall how efficient he was at scoring touchdowns last year. I still got him, hovering somewhere around 1,000 rushing yards, coming down from 1,200 last year. I mean, that was, I'm pretty sure, like an all-time record for a quarterback. So I don't think we can expect all-time records in rushing every single year. That'd be kind of like expecting Pat Mahomes to throw for 50 every single year. Somewhere around here, I think he had 3,100 passing yards last year. I would expect the same, anywhere from 3,000 to 3,300. But really what made him awesome last year was the rate that he scored touchdowns. The whole offense, at the rate the whole offense scored touchdowns. And I just think you're going to see some of those 50-50 balls he would throw up. Those prayers were answered last year, and I don't think every year they're going to be answered. I think he's going to finish with higher than 6 interceptions. I got him somewhere between 10 and 14. But yeah, that's what I expect from Lamar this year.
All right. Don, what are your thoughts on Lamar coming from an opposing team's viewpoint?
I like Lamar a lot. The thing that he does that a lot of these running style quarterbacks, and particularly early in the career of a running type quarterback, is they have a hard time coming off their primary read. He doesn't seem to have that difficulty and is able to use an effective passing tree and not lock in and go. He's also not completely dependent on running. That's something that he uses as an option, and it's not something he is absolutely married to. So you just have a totally dynamic weapon. Now, for me, one thing I worry about with the Ravens in general is the retirement of all-world guard Marshall Yanda and no real replacement for him. He was a one-man line mover, and now you're trying to fill that in-house. That's a concern for me.
Yeah, it has to be a concern. Also a big concern, Brendan, is when you look behind Lamar Jackson. Is there anybody on this roster that you would want to have, even in a deep dynasty league?
Yeah, RG3. Yeah, RG3 is intriguing just because he's probably the most boom or bust backup quarterback in the entire league. Obviously, his floor is a lot lower than his ceiling is, but I wouldn't be afraid to roster Lamar in a deep league. And then Trace McSorley, I don't like his name. He should be playing lacrosse. I don't like him at all.
Yes, that is possibly the best take that has ever happened on any of these pods. That is fantastic.
I'll do you one better. He looks like he should be charging somebody $10 for a Red Solo Cup in front of a frat party.
Absolutely.
All right. So moving over to the running back room, they get an exciting infusion of talent. What are we thinking about Mark Ingram, though? Tyler?
I think You're going to see kind of similar to the whole offense. You're going to see more of the same, just a little bit less. In terms of how it's divvied up, I think Dobbins is going to slide into the Gus Edwards role. Obviously, I think he's going to take that role will expand from what it was last year. But I still think Mark Ingram's going to see anywhere from 180 to 200 carries, somewhere around 1,000 yards. I would say 1,000 yards might be the ceiling this year. But I would expect anywhere safely between 700, 900 yards with 6 or 7 touchdowns. I think safely you could put that.
And where do you see J.K. Dobbins finishing as far as carries?
Presuming everybody remains healthy, I think he's going to get somewhere between 120, 150, and come in around 500 to 700 rushing yards. I think Gus Edwards had 700 last year on around 130 carries. You guys can go back and check that, but I think those are pretty much around what he had. That was being super efficient, so if Dobbins can come in and be as efficient as Edwards and Ingram was last year, then we can probably exceed 700 yards.
And you don't see Dobbins taking away any of Ingram's carries?
So I just think they run the ball so much. Like, the whole offense pretty much is basically advanced version of the option, in my opinion. I know, we can get into this whole Lamar Jackson is a pure passer, but I think that, not pure passer, but can pass at a high level. I'm not in that camp. I think just the way the offense is structured and the amount of carries they give to everybody is kind of what opens things up in the passing game for him. So on that, I think there's going to be plenty of carries to go around for both Ingram and Dobbins. I really do.
Okay. Don, what are you thinking about Gus Edwards and Justice Hill? Are they worth rostering?
Gus Edwards is definitely worth rostering, but in a deeper format, and particularly a PPR format, you're definitely going to want to have those opportunities for him. I really see Dobbins taking over his role, just like Tyler had suggested. And further, I see Dobbins eating into Ingram's carries as well. Justice Hill, to me, seems like the odd man out, so barring an injury, I worry about it, but still having him rostered makes sense. It's a risk worth taking in a deeper league format.
That makes sense. Brendan, any hope for Justice Hill?
No, I think them drafting J.K. Dobbins where they did, he was the highest running back they've taken since Ray Rice, and I think that's pretty telling. So the fourth guy on the depth chart there, I don't see a lot of hope for him right now.
Yeah, one thing I do want to say about the running backs here, I have a feeling from a fantasy standpoint they're going to be very frustrating this year because this has the absolute earmarks of a riding the hot hand situation. So a guy that blows up one week may get you peanuts the next and then blow up again. So if you can get 2 out of 3, you're doing really well for yourself. But I see this as a boom and bust kind of position.
And I just to add quickly, that I agree with. That's kind of why I think at the end of the year, Dobbins and Ingram's numbers will be comparable because it's going to be a game-to-game type thing where it's going to be Ingram one week and then Dobbins the next week, and it is going to be frustrating, I think.
Yeah, as dynasty managers, it's becoming more and more frustrating as more teams go to the running back by committee. And especially when you throw in the fact that Lamar Jackson is going to get probably close to 1,000 yards. Now you have 3 options, and you never know who's going to get it each week. All right, now looking at the wide receivers, one of the guys I'm very high on this year, and I had him ranked 13th in our wide receiver rankings, is Marquise Brown. And I know I admitted that I might have been a little bit under the influence when I did those rankings. But Tyler, tell me why you're high on Marquise Brown.
Really, he's the only elite option, I would say. He's the only one with first round draft pedigree, and in an offense where there's probably not going to be as many targets to go around as the average NFL offense. I just think his play style is he's kind of a boom or bust. There's going to be weeks where he drops 25, 30 points, and then there's going to be some weeks where he finishes for 2 catches on 5 targets, and that's just how it's going to be. But out of all the options available, he brings the most week-to-week upside for sure.
What else are we thinking? Don, where are you on? Oh, I know where you are. Never mind. Brendan, where are you on Marquise Brown?
I saw that he added some pounds over the offseason, so I'm hoping he can stay healthy. A foot injury is no joke, but he's got elite speed, and we saw what Lamar can do throwing it deep last year. So some more volume should only increase his stock.
Now, Don, you're a big man, sort of like myself. There was a lot of people scoffing over the ability of Marquise Brown to put on 23 pounds in a summer. I put on 23 pounds or more this summer since COVID hit. Actually, I've been taking a lot of it off lately, but how possible do you think it is to put on 23 pounds of muscle in an off season?
Boy, that's very difficult. Now, the thing that he does have in his favor is that NFL quality strength and conditioning coaches put them on a complete program, diet, lifestyle, absolutely everything. They monitor sleep, they monitor exercise. He's been given access to things that he has never had. Even coming from a high-quality college program, the NFL is that extra step forward. 23 pounds is a tremendous amount, so there's got to be a little scrap in there. But my goodness, if that's muscle, good on him. Hopefully it doesn't cost speed, but he knows that's his bread and butter, so he's going to be very conscious of that. He also comes from an NFL bloodline, so they know, and his camp knows how to handle body conditioning, particularly for a wide receiver. So 23 is a huge number, but even if it's more like 15, that's fabulous for his career.
Yeah, he was one of the lighter receivers. Anything he can add and keep on during the season, because that's always the hardest, is keeping the weight on in the midst of an NFL season. Now, going a little bit deeper, we have Miles Boykin, drafted last year. I believe Matt Waldman had him ranked as the number 1 wide receiver overall in the class last year. Willie Snead. Either of those guys stand out to you, Tyler?
Willie Snead, not so much. He's kind of just a career slot guy. Miles Boykin, in any other offense, like if Miles Boykin would have got drafted by like the Saints or something, I would have a little bit more optimism about his career. But he's just never going to see the volume. He's built like a guy where his upside's going to be met with volume. He's a big, prototypical X receiver. He has athleticism, but he's just not going to see volume, in my opinion. And that's pretty much just what it is. As long as he's a Raven, he's going to struggle and be spotty week to week, and nothing you can really count on for a year-long starter.
But now, Tyler, you are high on Devin Duvernay.
Yes, because I think if we just talked about Hollywood's health, I think if Hollywood does get injured, Duvernay will kind of step into the speedster, catch a slant over the middle and take it 50 yards to the house role. I think he can do that better than Boykins can. I just think his skill set would slide in kind of similarly to Hollywood's if Hollywood were here then. He's kind of like a dynasty stash, I would say.
Is there anybody else in that wide receiver room who stands out to you?
After Duvernay, there's not really anybody. I see a lot of people liking James Proche, but he'll be 24 before September ends, so I'm just going to stay off of him because of that. And Chris Moore, Jaleel Scott, I'm not a fan of either of those guys. So the guys we already named that's about it in that room.
Yeah. Don, looking at the tight ends, what do you think? Where do you think Mark Andrews finishes this year?
Andrews is going to pick up right where he left off. This is a very repeatable season for him from last year. He's definitely going to be a key in the red zone, and he's already got an excellent rapport with Lamar Jackson, so there's no reason in the world to think that he's going to regress out of the top 5 in tight ends for fantasy.
Tyler, your thoughts on Andrews?
More of the same. He's going to need to sustain the same or close to the touchdown rate from last year. Again, targets on the premium offense. I don't think there's many of them to go around, but I do think he's one of the guys who is going to see. I think he's Lamar's favorite target, so I think he's going to see the most consistent targets out of anybody in the offense.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. Mark Andrews is an absolute stud tight end. I have no doubt he's going to finish in the top 3 of the position. He's an early drafting candidate if you're in a tight end premium league, only because of, like you guys both said, his consistency and his rapport. Behind him, Nick Boyle and Jacob Breland. I mean, Nick Boyle had some decent games in his career, but neither of those guys are anything to write home about. Tyler, anything you want to say to finish up our Ravens talk?
I just want to touch on, Justice Hill, kind of RIP. I think this is the end of Justin Hill, at least until Mark Ingram leaves town, and then Dobbins might step into the Ingram role, and then Hill could step into his own role potentially. But I just want to say, and also to touch on Prochet. I do like Prochet, but I think that in a normal year, the Prochet Duvernay would have been a nice camp battle to watch. But I don't know if we're going to get that this year. So I'm just kind of going off of the prospect I like it better. One second, guys. 1 second.
Sorry,
It
guys.
definitely sounds like the Browns fans are speaking.
That's right. But yeah, that's pretty much it for the Ravens as far as touch on Prochet and touch on Hill.
All right, so let's move on to the Bengals, who I guess I got stuck with the Bengals. So looking at the Bengals, Joe Burrow, I mean, that's the main story here, right? Joe Burrow, drafted out of LSU, kind of a lackluster career up until his senior season when Joe Brady came in and kind of blew everything up. I meant his final season. I don't know if he was a product of an exceptional offense where he had record-breaking talent at every position, or if he is truly going to become an elite QB. However, for dynasty purposes, for redraft purposes, he's going to throw the ball. You're looking at least 600 attempts by him this year, probably closer to 650, which is what you want in a QB. I'd be looking at him if you're going a zero QB approach in a Superflex league and waiting until later, definitely trying to get him in the 6th or 7th round. That's a good start. And you're guaranteed at least 5 to 6 years of play out of him. Don, what do you think about Joe Burrow? Is he a product of Joe Brady, or is Joe Brady more a product of him?
I think it's probably a little both here, but the big thing about him is the way he comes off primary reads, finds open receivers, and is used to playing with NFL talent. He's a guy who had what's going to be, till it's all said and done, at least 3, if not 4, first-round picks coming out of the skill positions on his team. In CEH, the wide receiver the Vikings took this year, and the big wide receiver coming out next year in Chase. It's a load and embarrassment of riches and talents. Now he's coming to a situation where he's got great wide receivers to work with. So he's actually moving into a position where he is poised to have some success, which is key for a young quarterback. And if he can start that, who knows? He's definitely got the arm strength, and he can definitely read defenses and move defenses with his eyes. So there's real potential here.
Yeah, I have to say my favorite quality of Joe Burrow in the games that I watched when he was at LSU was when he was moving out of the pocket. He always had both hands on the ball. He was always in a position to make a throw. Now, I know he does have tiny little carny hands, which is probably why he keeps 2 hands on the ball, because he can't hold it in one hand. So, I mean, I am a little nervous about fumbles, but I like how professional he looked in his movement in the pocket. A lot of quarterbacks coming out of college, the second they get pressure, they're running around holding the ball like a loaf of bread, just trying to get away from danger. He is always ready to pass the ball. Now, behind him, we have failed experiment Ryan Finley and a Jake Dolegala. I don't even know what that is. I'm assuming it's an NFL backup quarterback, but I'm not sure. Brendan, are you investing in Ryan Finley stock?
No, I'm not
right now?
investing in Ryan Finley stock. He doesn't excite me at all. But I will add to what Don said about Burrow. He's absolutely right that Burrow was used to playing with NFL talent at the college level, but the only problem is he was used to playing against college level talent on the other side of the ball, and now he's going to be playing against a lot better talent, especially in his own division. There's some pretty good defenses there that he'll see 6 times a year. So I would lower my expectations, at least in the beginning. I think his eyes are going to be opened, maybe in a bad way, and in the start.
Yeah, it's like you talked about in the AFC East pod with Le'Veon Bell having to go against the Bills and the Pats twice a year. Same thing going against the Steelers and Ravens pass defenses. Even when those teams don't have a great pass defense.
The Browns D-line is no joke, too. Garrett's a monster, and they've got some guys. Denzel Ward shuts down guys to limit the time he's got in the pocket. So he's got a tough road ahead.
Yeah, and they have one of my favorite D tackles in Larry Ogunjobi, who can provide a lot of pressure up the middle, which all quarterbacks hate. Going to the running backs now, my star for this team is Joe Mixon. I know fantasy Twitter is really divided on Joe Mixon. Most people are out on him. For me, this is the year that Mixon either will rise to his elite status that he has been sort of granted his first 3 years, or he fades into the good night. Last year, he finished as running back 13. He started, the entire year was pretty poor in the beginning for the entire team. But in his last 5 games, he averaged 132 scrimmage yards a game and 0.8 TDs, which is a pretty solid way to end the season. I'm hoping that continues. I think they get some offensive linemen back this year, so their line's going to be better. They have a better quarterback. They have better wide receivers. So hopefully he's going to see a little bit more opportunity than he received all of last year. Tyler, what are you thinking about Joe Mixon?
I like Joe Mixon. I like his measurables. He's got the, elite size for workhorse running back. But mainly my biggest issue with Joe Mixon is, one thing I really look for when I am picking a running back in fantasy is, how many times is that offense in general going to be near the end zone? And I think with the Bengals, that's going to be lower than league average. They're going to have a rookie quarterback. I like Burrow, for the future, his outlook. But the truth is most rookie quarterbacks just suck when they come to the NFL. It's the hardest position to learn. And there's no camp this year. So I just wonder how many times he's going to be able to be near the end zone to score elite touchdowns. So
that's a good point. Don.
Overall good player, though.
Don, what do you see behind him? Anything stand out to you?
Gio Bernard is a guy that's kind of just a jobber. He's been around for what feels like forever at this point. Trevion Williams is kind of in the same boat. These guys are somewhat capable, kind of plug-in players, but Mixon is absolutely the stud of the class here. And with Joe Burrow, who has a track record of loving to throw to running backs, that's why CEH had so much value. Mixon's in line to catch a pile, so he's probably not coming out on passing downs. They're going to use Joe a lot.
Yeah, especially entering the last year of his contract. I don't know if he's going to get another deal there, if they're going to let him move on, but it's definitely going to be interesting to see. Now, the wide receiver room, to me, is pretty interesting. My sleeper for this team is AJ Green. I'm not exactly sure if he can technically be a sleeper. He's a Hall of Fame level wide receiver. No doubt about it. Every record that he has, all of his performance are elite level with Hall of Fame level wide receivers. So if he is healthy, and I know that's a big if, right? If he is healthy, there is no reason why he won't lead this team in receptions, in yards, and in touchdowns. He has a young, aggressive QB, so I don't see why he couldn't finish as a top 10 wide receiver if he plays in 15 games this year. Am I, you can tell me if I'm crazy, Tyler. Am I crazy for thinking that about AJ Green?
I don't think you're crazy for saying that, but the key caveat is if he plays 15 games, and I'm firmly in the camp of he will not play 15 games. I could be wrong. He is a Hall of Fame level talent, even still at this age, but you just look at guys that play like AJ Green, the above the rim, attack catch point, rely on kind of just your overall body control type guys, like DeAndre Johnsons, Calvin Johnsons, Vincent Jacksons. Those guys all start to break down at 30, 31 years old, and that's kind of where AJ Green is. And, your feet are pretty important in football. I don't know if, it's common knowledge or not, and he seems to be having major problems with his feet, so.
Sorry, JJ, but I think you are crazy for expecting a top 10 finish, top 12 finish out of AJ Green. I think a lot of people are expecting Joe Burrow to come in and immediately just boost everybody on the offense, and I would temper expectations there. I don't think it's going to happen. This year, at least.
See, I understand. I don't think he's going to boost AJ Green. AJ Green hasn't played in a year and a half. I mean, 2 years ago, I think he played in 9 games and was having a great season with Andy Dalton. I think if you can perform with Andy Dalton, you can perform with Joe Burrow, especially when you look at the weapons around him. Tyler Boyd is solid, although I have him as my fading star. T. Higgins is up and coming. Joe Mixon is better than the running backs they had when AJ Green was in his prime. So I'm leaning towards the fact that he's going to command targets, and as long as he is healthy, he can deliver on those targets. For me, Tyler Boyd he is feasted because he's had no competition for targets on that team. But AJ Green is back. T. Higgins is on the roster. Like Don said, Joe Mixon is going to be more involved in the passing game. I just don't see Boyd being as talented as Green. I don't see him being as physically talented as T. Higgins, who to me is just a bigger, stronger, and faster Tyler Boyd. Where are we thinking Tyler Boyd finishes this year? Don?
I think Tyler Boyd is going to finish as the best wide receiver fantasy-wise on the Bengals, mainly because I don't have A.J. Green finishing the season. And I love what he does. I love his game. He's an intermediate, kind of come out of the slot and then work the passing routes through the center of the field. And for young quarterbacks, that's really helpful. T. Higgins is definitely going to get his, but he's going to come in as a rookie with no camp, very limited time. He's probably going to have a limited route tree, and they're probably just going to send him down the sidelines or give him the go routes. And I see him and Green clearing it out and Boyd being the one who does the work underneath where the volume of catches is going to be. The touchdown numbers probably not going to be huge, but I think the volume numbers are where he's going to make his money.
So you think AJ Green isn't better than Auden Tate?
No, I absolutely think AJ Green is better than Auden Tate.
But you don't think he's going to get more targets than Auden Tate?
I think we're talking about two different things here. I think AJ Green will get more targets than Auden Tate. I was talking about Boyd.
Right. But I mean, Tate was the only competition last year for wide receiver targets. Now AJ Green is healthy and they brought in T. Higgins. Do you still see him getting 140 targets with those two guys?
Tate, absolutely not. There's no way. He's going to be faded in the offense for sure, just by simple
but
volume.
Boyd, do you see Boyd getting 140 targets?
Probably not. He's going to have to do a little more with what he gets. I don't see that he's going to get 140, but ideally, with the extra talent around, hopefully he'll be able to do more with the targets he gets. That's going to be to him.
Now, none of us have talked about, the number one wide receiver on the team, John Ross. Brendan, what do you see happening with John Ross this year?
I'm very excited to see, first, if he can stay healthy. That's the biggest thing, obviously. He's missed plenty of games over his first few years in the league. He was obviously drafted for his speed, and speed is used, obviously, sometimes for yards after the catch. But for him, the hope was to use him on the deep ball. And Andy Dalton's not exactly the guy to chuck it downfield accurately. Every time I picture Andy Dalton throwing it deep, he's being intercepted by a Steelers defender on a Monday night. So if Joe Burrow can place some in John Ross's hands and he stays healthy, I think he'll have some really nice weeks.
Okay. Tyler, anybody else in that wide receiver room you're interested in? I know that's your position. Guys like Tate, Erickson, Morgan, anybody of those guys standing out for you?
No, the ones I would say the only buddy that I'm really I would feel comfortable drafting where his ADP is Tyler Boyd. I wish there was a more of the same star, because that's what I would put Tyler Boyd at. I think he's going to be more of the same. I don't think he's going to get 140 targets. But I think that last year he was getting the best corner, maybe even the best corner plus help, because there was no A.J. Green. The next guy was Auden Tate. So, in the defensive meetings before you play the Bengals, defensive coordinators going to the defensive backs and saying, Tyler Boyd's the guy we got to stop. So I think that might be a little bit more of an open question this year. So if you look at his 2018 season, he pretty much had the same season he had last year on less targets. So I think you're going to see that Tyler Boyd in 2020. And I think one thing, Burrow, his BFF pretty much on the football field was Justin Jefferson. And I think Justin Jefferson's a more athletic Tyler Boyd. So I think there's a seamless fit between QB style and what the wide receiver likes to do on the field. So.
Well, that was way too much time spent on the Bengals by all of us. So shame on us all. Unfortunately, we're now going to the Browns. Brendan,
this is
what are we thinking about the QB room there?
I like Baker more than you, but it seems like you hate Baker. He was a first overall pick. For a reason, he had a very good year. He up until Kyler and then up until Joe Burrow, he was PFF's highest graded quarterback in college. So obviously there's some merit to the Browns taking him first overall. And I think his biggest thing last year was coaching. Freddie Kitchens did not do him any help. I remember watching Browns games where he was routinely waiting for his receivers to all run these deep fly routes down the field, and there was nobody in the backfield to block, and he had a second and a half to until the pressure came. So I think Stefanski coming over from the Vikings is going to help him a ton. Kirk Cousins was, solid but unspectacular last year, pretty much every year of his career. But I think a better year is in store for Baker Mayfield for sure.
Don?
Yeah, I'm not a big Shaken Baker fan here. I'm about done with him, actually, but that's just me. I don't like at all what they did with their offensive line. I don't like what they're going to try to do here. And the only thing that I think says or gives him redeeming value is that they're going to run the ball an absolute ton, which is going to pull defenders upfield and give him opportunity over the top. That team has been an absolute dumpster fire since he got there. I'm not hanging that on him. That's the organization. And I worry about any young quarterback that goes to Cleveland because they just get chewed up and spit out.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate pattern that we see happen over and over. But that offensive talent, man, that's so hard to overlook. That's one hell of a team they put together as far as your skill position players. Tyler, is there any backup? Is Case Keenum the only backup worth looking at there?
I would say, yeah. I don't even know who their third. There was some guy on Hard Knocks that was being featured as a character when the Browns were doing that. So maybe he's still around, but that's pretty much it. Case Keenum, that's what you're looking at if Baker Mayfield.
I think it's worth noting that Keenum's best year and really only good year as a starter was when he was in Minnesota playing for Kevin Stefanski when he was the quarterback's coach there. And he played good enough to force John Elway to give him $25 million guaranteed. So Case Keenum's one of my favorite backups this year.
I think actually there was a clause in his contract that Stefanski got 10% of that contract that he signed with.
That would be an awesome clause. More coaches should get that put in. All right, so let's go over to the running back room now. There's a huge debate over Chubb is Chubb worth an early pick in startup drafts? Brendan, where are you falling on the Chubb Hunt debate?
So obviously Nick Chubb is one of the premier running back talents in the entire NFL. There's not too many guys talent-wise who you would take ahead of him. He can do it all, and he proved it last year with his fantasy points. But Kareem Hunt is my sleeper on this team to shoot up a lot better than he did last year. That pick is kind of cheating because he was suspended until week 10, but he was also only 36th for running backs in points per game, and I think he finishes a lot higher than that this year. Obviously, Stefanski leaned on Dalvin Cook to be the lead dog last year, but Dalvin also didn't have a guy as talented as Kareem backing him up. 20 carries were the norm for Chubb while Kareem was suspended, but for the last 5 weeks, he only got 17 carries once, and then every other week was lower than that. Kareem's talent will just force Stefanski to put him on the field, and he's obviously a much better receiver than Chubb. He has incredible balance while he runs and catches screens and things like that. And unlike Cooper, I don't think he was just a product of his former system in Kansas City. He's being drafted after guys like Singletary, Akers, Montgomery, and I'd rather have Kareem than all of them.
So now, we have a dynasty focus on this pod, obviously. As I like to say, we're not called Ride or Redraft. Kareem Hunt, what do we see? Is he going to stay in Cleveland next year? Does somebody give a 26... Oh, by the way, happy birthday, Kareem Hunt. It's his birthday today. Does somebody give a 26-year-old Kareem Hunt a big contract next year? Tyler?
I don't think a big contract, but I think somewhere between $6 and $8 million. And I think somebody in Kareem Hunt's position with some of the negative track record that he might have, I think he would gladly take a starting job on any team that would be willing to offer him that money. So I think he has to have some self-awareness going to the negotiating table. If you're a team negotiating with him, are you going to feel comfortable giving him, even Melvin Gordon money? I don't know.
Yeah, not me. Definitely not me.
Not my Steelers, hopefully.
So, all right, let's go over to the wide receiver room. Brendan, tell me about OBJ.
OBJ, he's my star on this team. I see him getting back in the top 10, the top 12, around that range. He was wide receiver 26 last year, and although he was on the injury report with a groin injury every single week last year, he did play all 16 games, so the volume was there for him. Over this offseason, he had surgery to repair a core muscle injury, so if he's back out there for all 16 again, I'm betting that he hits that top 10, top 12 mark. Basically, as long as he's healthy, he's too talented to finish in the mid-20s again. And just like everybody else in this offense, the upgrade from Kitchens to Stefanski, that's tough to say, should do wonders. I remember watching Browns games again where he was just running all over the field and Baker had no time to throw him the ball. So I refuse to believe that Kevin Stefanski isn't smarter than that.
I would liken Freddie Kitchens' play calling to the kid in Madden who just calls 4 verticals every play. Exactly what the Browns were last year. So we don't have a 12-year-old kid calling plays anymore. So hopefully we get more of a rookie passing touchdown record Baker than.
Yeah, how bad was Freddie Kitchens? Like he was epic bad.
Only the Browns.
Only the Browns, man.
I was just going to say, only in Disney movies does that kind of stuff work out, where you give an inexperienced guy and it's a miracle and it works out. Not in real life.
No.
Sorry, Browns.
No, it's definitely not a Teen Wolf movie. There's no Scott going to turn into a wolf and save the team. All right. Now, Jarvis Landry, who's one of my favorite wide receivers. All he does is catch the ball a lot. Do we see him finishing ahead of Odell, Brendan?
No.
Or is that over?
Yeah, Odell's healthy again, presumably, and his talent is just going to win out. That's pretty much all it is for me there.
Yeah, Don, what do you think about Jarvis?
I like Jarvis a lot. He's a wide receiver that his production, fantasy-wise, is predicated on getting a volume of receptions, and I think that's going to be there for him. Ideally, with a healthy OBJ, he's going to take the top off the defense, which is going to open up Landry underneath, and we see these kind of underneath guys just getting volume. And if we have a healthy OBJ, it's going to be feast and feast for Landry as well. Those two have every opportunity here with legitimate play calling and a quality running game, if they can continue to run like they had, to have just a wonderful opportunity now in an offense that isn't sponsored by Madden.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing that's consistent is that he's consistently targeted. Looking at his history, the fewest targets he's ever received is 112 his rookie year. And as I like to point out, he hasn't missed a game as a pro. Has not missed a game as a pro. The best ability is availability. So looking at the rest of that room, you have Rashard Higgins, who I'm a fan of, but I don't know how deep they're going to go. You also have 70s funk band, Donovan Peoples-Jones. Anybody on that roster outside of Landry that we're interested in putting on our dynasty teams?
Yeah.
Tyler. Oh, Brendan, go ahead.
I'll just mention that Donovan Peoples-Jones, 99th percentile burst score. I don't think he had the best chance to succeed at Michigan. And after the draft this year, Urban Meyer said he should have been a first-round pick. And we know Urban knows how to evaluate receivers based on all the guys that have come out of OSU. So I think that, it carries at least a little bit of weight.
Yeah, Tyler, what are you thinking? Any DPJ worth a pickup?
I mean, I would say no, but I just want to touch on. I'm a big fan of Austin Hooper this year. This is a little bit narrative street, but I think I just read that he flew to Baker Mayfield's home in Austin during the offseason. They spent 3 weeks together. I'm sure that was, God knows what they were doing, but hopefully they were building a fruitful relationship that'll translate to a lot of fantasy points for my team in the Writers League. But I just like Austin Hooper. I like what he did in Atlanta last year. I get that people might think he's a system guy, and to be honest with you, he probably is a little bit of a system guy, but I think he was a system guy for Atlanta, and he's going to another system that features tight end. So I'm buying Austin Hooper.
Now, Brendan, you are not an Austin Hooper fan.
That's correct. I disagree with what Tyler said. He is my fader on this team. To fade out of the top 12. He was tight end 6 last year, but I think that was more a product of the Atlanta system. Matt Ryan was doing his thing before he got there, and he'll be doing his thing after he leaves now. I think we'll get a sense of how he'll do by looking at Kyle Rudolph and Irv Smith last year. Again, going back to how Stefanski ran the Vikings offense. Rudolph was tight end 14, so not that far off from 12. But I think a healthy Njoku is better than a rookie year Irv Smith to give him some more competition there. They're both going to be on the field a lot, which is nice for both of them. But there's definitely going to be some competition for the top guy in that offense.
Yeah, I'm excited for both Njoku and Hooper. I don't think Hooper's going to put up the numbers he did without Matt Ryan. And especially with David Njoku next to him. But the Stefanski ran last year in Minnesota a 2 tight end set 34% of the time, 12 personnel. So just looking at this with either Chubb or Hunt in the backfield, you have Hooper and Njoku, and then you have Landry and OBJ. That is a formidable offense to face up against. As long as they can give Baker some time and he doesn't completely implode, I see decent numbers for both Hooper and Njoku. But yeah, I'm not a huge Hooper guy myself.
I'll also add that Harrison Bryant, the third guy in that room there, won the John Mackey Award for best tight end in college football last year, and they took him in the 4th round knowing that they already had Njoku and they just paid Hooper a bunch of money, so they must have liked him a lot. Plus, Njoku only has 1 year left on his contract after this year, so he's a guy to keep an eye on. in a dynasty league.
Now, Tyler, do you think they should consider trading Njoku then?
I mean, absolutely. Partly because I do know they're two tight ends that team, but I like the guy that they drafted with the 3rd round pick. I think if he was running like, I correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I watched some tape on him where he was being split out wide, and pretty much being guarded like a wide receiver, one-on-one with the best corner. He was winning matchups. So he's definitely got pass catching chops. He's a little small, but I mean, technique wise and pass catching wise, I think he's better than Njoku personally. I mean, I don't think Njoku's bad. I just think you have 3 quality tight ends, and I mean, are you going to play 3? No. So I'm sure there's buyers for Njoku. 2nd round pick, 3rd round pick, another Antonio Gibson.
Yeah, and taking a pick for him could definitely help them invest in their offensive line in the next draft.
Yes.
So moving him is not a bad idea if they can get at least a day 2 pick for him. But I don't know if DeAndre Hopkins went for a 2nd and a bag of broken kicking tees. I don't know how much you're going to get for Njoku.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it seems like.
But anything's better than him walking, in my opinion.
True. That's true.
I'll be honest, any team with their sights set on the playoffs this year probably shouldn't trade away that's looking to start, or at least play a bunch of snaps, just because depth is going to be so important this year. With COVID, I wouldn't be looking to trade away a guy that can play right now for a pick. Unless you're a team like the Jaguars.
I know this might be...
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. Now, do you think teams are taking this season as seriously as they have other seasons? And I ask that because you have all these guys who opted out. It's not a ton of guys, but you have players opting out. Guys are going to be on the COVID list. It's probably going to be a shortened season, or at least they're going to have to take a break. Some teams might forfeit some games. Do you think teams are as invested in this season as they are just trying to get through this season to next year?
Boy, that's an interesting one. I would love to say that everybody's taking it as seriously as possible, and our next team is one that is definitely taking it seriously, and we'll talk about why. But teams that are kind of at the end of their window are taking it absolutely seriously because they have guys or contract situations that this is kind of the end of the road before it's fiscally time to blow it up, or your best players are starting to age out of the league. Other teams that may be kind of pushing on the year are your bubble teams or teams that were already coming in a tough situation. You're not going to take such a beating in terms of press and everything if you're coming in with a very young squad and just hoping for the best. Well, you can always write it off as, we were all derailed because of the pandemic. So it's almost like a built-in excuse for coaches who might be on the hot seat or a GM who's kind of close to the margin, like, well, our original plan was torpedoed here. But I think the teams that are kind of nearing the end of their window are absolutely taking it seriously.
Fair enough. Brendan?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a team-by-team basis depending on how many guys opt out or get sick or hurt during the year, and that can change for any team as the year goes on, and we'll see just how bad it gets as the year goes on.
Yeah, Tyler?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a mixed bag, as both those guys previously touched on. One thing I want to say is just kind of my thoughts racing while we're all talking. I think it's going to be interesting. Fantasy values after this year going into 2020, like maybe some rookies who underperform. I can just hear my league mates, me trying to trade with some guys, maybe as a buy low, going, well, it's pandemic, only 3 weeks preparation for the season. So I'm just kind of curious what people's reactions are going to be to people who perform poorly. Is that going to be an excuse that keeps getting brought up, or, just my thoughts on the whole pandemic thing.
Yeah, and I will say, from the player's perspective, they better be taking it absolutely seriously because the average career is only 3 years. If this is one of your 3 years, you better make every bit of mark you can to play for that possible next contract.
Yeah. It seems to me the NFL is always serious, where other teams tank, like other leagues, you'll see teams like really tanking. In the NFL, even the teams who are supposed to tank never tank. They always play their hardest because
it's what makes the league the best.
Yeah, because you can't go half-ass in a football game. You go half-ass, you're going to get
absolutely.
hurt.
I would. They're two completely different sports, but I would equate it to similar to like UFC fighting. Like you could have a guy who's completely favored to demolish the other guy, but that guy who's not favored to win still has to go in there because he's going to get punched in the face. You know what I mean? The NFL, you're going to get you got a guy running full speed at you, so you have to be ready always, even if you're not a competitive
Right.
team.
What are you going to do? Just sidestep him?
Exactly. It's just a little different than guys in baseball and basketball, they can loaf, freely and not, risk getting their head bashed in.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
And there's so many more players to control in a tank situation.
Yes.
In basketball, you only have 5 guys on the court. You can easily play 5 lesser players and get away with it. Unfortunately, unless you're the Jets, who just play their 5 lesser players at every position. Anyway, so this is going way long. So we're going to skip the Steelers today. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Don and Tyler, everybody loves the Steelers. So, Don, should we care about Mason Rudolph or Devlin Hodges behind Ben?
Okay, here's the deal. The dude named Duck can go away.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about Duck. What's likely to happen is the Steelers are probably going to take Duck, who's got some experience here, keep him away from the rest of the team, and he's going to be the emergency everybody else got COVID quarterback, who you probably won't see Duck again unless it's absolute just nightmare situation.
So what I would suggest is just putting him in like a plastic bubble that says break in case of COVID.
Pretty much. He's going to go to his own little space, have a nice little happy room, little duck pond over there, and just swim around.
Pond. You're cut off. That's enough. No duck
Mason
pond.
Rudolph, though, is a guy you want to have on a roster in a deep setting because Ben's not going to be here forever. And it's probable that whoever's next is going to have to sit a little while because the Steelers probably aren't going to be as bad as a team that's going to just turn it over to a first-round quarterback instantly. So Mason will probably have that 1 year as the guy at the controls, so you could use him in a situation where he'll be a bye-week stub or he'll just be a guy who can get you some points in a week where you're hard up if you're in injury troubles. So Mason has value, but don't run out and draft him high or anything.
That was a trick question.
Probably not the long-term guy.
It was a trick question. Nobody outside of Ben has any value on that team. Looking at... I'm just kidding. Sorry.
I wouldn't trust Mason Rudolph to be my local dog catcher. Okay.
And I would literally put Devlin in an airproof glass container after watching him play last year. So running backs, James Conner. We have Benny Snell. Tell me about him, Don. Quickly.
I got Connor as my guy to avoid. He's fading, and simply because the fella cannot stay healthy. We have plenty of guys in the Rider Dynasty group here who loathe the term injury prone, but injuries seem to find James, and he's never completed a 16-game season, and I don't see it happening this year either. The running back to know, because he's available late in most formats, is Benny Snell. He's the most probable to get the most touches of the running backs that are left, and he's the most likely to get goal line touches because dude's big. He's entering his second year in the league, where we tend to see our players make the highest potential gain in their careers from year 1 to year 2. So Benny Snell is definitely a guy that you should be looking at late because he's available in that 12-round kind of area. So there's absolute potential there for Benny Snell. Anthony McFarland is a rookie this year that has kind of home run potential, but he's not going to get the volume that you really want.
All right, Tyler. Is he right or wrong about those two, James Conner and Benny Snell?
I think he's pretty much spot on. I, as a Steelers fan, the James Conner story is awesome. I root for him when he's out there. He's a great team guy. I follow him on social media. Does a lot of stuff for the fans. Very active for the community. But in terms of a football player, he can't stay healthy, and he plays running back, the most injury-prone position in the NFL. So those two things really don't mix, in my opinion, logically. But I want to touch on the Benny Snell point because I think he's absolutely correct. And I think a lot of this just might be because we're both Steelers fans, but I see a lot of talk outside of like the non-Steeler fan community about McFarland, and I think he's an electric player. You know, he's got some game tape where everybody always brings up his Ohio State tape. But I heard Mike Tomlin say and read his quote saying, you know, Benny Snell's the guy that's going to carry most of the workload. He's got the size for it. He's not explosive by any means, but he is a guy who can handle 20 carries a game, and he will get the goal line work. So I think he would be the most predictable. It would be a little bit of committee. McFarland would see some time, maybe even Jalen Samuels. It would be messy for fantasy, but I think the player whose role is most consistent if James Conner goes down is Benny Snell. Absolutely.
Good to know. Wide receiver room. Are we expecting a Juju bounce back, Don?
Yeah, I expect Juju to bounce back. Ben's back, which means Juju's going to be back. It's kind of that simple. They have a fabulous rapport. He's going to be the wide receiver one, and he's got an interesting supporting cast with Deontay Johnson coming in, who's an absolute tactician as a route runner, so there's potential there to at least take some of the pressure off of Juju, which gives him the opportunity to thrive. They've also got an interesting rookie in Claypool, who's probably just going to be asked to do the downfield work this year, and James Washington is still an interesting player at this point. So there is kind of a sneaky amount of depth here, so it's interesting.
Brendan, what are you looking at as far as the depth?
I'm looking right at Chase Claypool. He's 6'4", 9 7/8 inches hands, 99th percentile speed score. So that combination's pretty unique right there. He was their first pick of the draft because of the Minka trade, which says a lot when a lot of people are high on all of Juju, Deontay, and James Washington. And it makes it 4 straight years that they've taken a wide receiver with one of their first 2 picks, which is pretty interesting. I just know that Ben is aging and he's always sort of banged up, so putting as much talent around him as possible is probably a good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Tyler, your thoughts on the wide receiver room?
I think Juju's going to come back to a little bit more of his previous form. I actually think that Juju's best season of his career is already behind him, and I don't think that's that crazy to say. I mean, 110 catches, I think around 1,500 yards. That's a pretty awesome season for a career high. But I think, you know, where him and Deontay Johnson are being drafted, I believe Juju's ADP is in 5 and Deontay's in 10 right now for redraft. So I just think that they're going to finish much closer together than their ADPs. So I would maybe take like a Cam Akers or DeAndre Swift, where you would take Juju or something like that, and then take Deontay later on in terms of just fantasy approach. But I think Juju's going to be a solid starter. I think he's going to score a lot of fantasy points. Probably, provided Ben is the old Ben, or 85% of the old Ben. Looking at 85, 90 catches as a ceiling, 1,200 yards, and hopefully around 10 touchdowns.
All right, Don, why don't you finish off the tight end room then?
Tight end room's actually very interesting in that they brought in Eric Ebron, who's just an absolute nightmare in the red zone.
Who? Eric Ebron?
Yeah.
Ebron.
Believe it or not.
Eric Ebron.
I can't pronounce things. You know that. This
I know.
is your first ride with me. But this is a fellow with a track record. He's now 6'5". This is poor Ben. He's gone his whole career without having a 6'5" guy since Plaxico Burress. Now he's got 3. So look for him to get a lot of opportunity in the red zone for the Steelers. And historically, the Steeler offense under Randy Fichtner has been very efficient in the red zone. I think Ebron, thank you for the correction, is going to be a significant part of that. The depth is interesting. Vance McDonald is kind of one of those guys who's been around and can play. And Zach Gentry at 6'7" is a absolute project and not someone I would worry about drafting at this point.
Is anybody predicting a top tight end 16 season or better for Ebron, Brendan?
No, I'm staying away from that whole room. Sorry, guys.
Yeah, me too. Tyler?
I think if Ebron proves to be useful at the goal line, he could sneak into the top 12. But unless he's getting, like 10 touchdowns, I would say no. it's just going to come down to touchdowns. And that's the story with most tight ends, honestly, outside of the top guys.
Yeah.
It's kind of touchdown or bust for a lot of them. So I just think that's a similar story with Ebron.
Yeah, definitely a tight end dependent position group. All right, guys. I think we said it all, or at least most of it, or at least Don did. Love you, buddy. So let's do our tags. Tell people where they can find you and any final thoughts you have. Tyler, go ahead.
What's up, guys? You can find me on @Delco on Twitter, EELL_CO_. Check me out.
Brendan.
I'm on Twitter at BCTAF. That's BCTAFFE. And again, I'll just mention what I said at the end of the last pod I did, just because I see Trey White clapping back at people about his potential decision to sit out. Don't be an a-hole to these players on Twitter. Just stay away. They're making a tough decision. Just support them and leave it at that.
Don?
Yeah, as per usual, you can find me nowhere because I choose happiness and stay away from social media. But again, these are all our projections and our predictions. Think critically. Examine things for yourself. And with fantasy, always, you do you. Make a team that will make you happy.
Very good, Don. I agree with what everybody said. If you want football, wear a mask. That's what it comes down to. Don't at players. Let them live their lives while we live our fantasy lives. So from all of us to all of you, be safe, be well, take care of each other. And as always, boat drinks, my friends. Boat drinks.